Hey y'all, my name is Christian. I'm a millennial, and this is the Millennial Mind. Millennials get a bad rap for being lazy, non-productive members of society. We also get told that our opinions are warped and don't matter. This podcast is designed to express a point of view on the world as a whole, but from a millennial's perspective. I will talk about love, current events, pretty much everything that comes to mind. Come join me on this journey on speaking my mind, and I would love for you to speak your mind as well. This podcast is sponsored by Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. It gives you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. Creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere, even on platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Once again, you can download the Anchor app, that's ANCHOR, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of The Millennial Mind. Thank you again for joining me on this journey of speaking my mind, and I hope that all of you are speaking your mind as well. So I wanted to get straight into the topic. I feel like I say that every episode, but I really be excited about each and every topic that I talk about, so don't judge me. But this topic that I'm going to talk about today is near and dear to my heart, and it is the foundation of how I live my life, how I was raised. It's just pretty much 50% of me as a person. And I'm sure it's probably the same for a lot of African Americans like me. So we'll get into it. Growing up churchy. So what I mean by that is growing up in a church. So growing up churchy, growing up in the church. Specifically an African American church. When people see an African American church, it's a little different from other churches that you've been to. I'll say that. African American churches, I love them because they're full of life. Not saying that other churches aren't full of life, but if you've ever been to an African American church, there is a lot of energy. There is a lot of emotion involved. When you go in, you know, you're feeling real bad about yourself, but when you come out, you feel like you can slay a dragon, okay? It's so true. There's something about an African American church that makes you feel good, that makes you feel like you're connected to God. It's a whole different experience. So if you've never been to an African American church, do that. For me, I've been going to church since I pretty much came out the womb. Really, while I was in the womb, I was going to church, okay? So, to give you a little bit of background, my mom, she got saved. And when I mean saved, I mean that she accepted Jesus Christ as her Savior, believed that He died on the cross, rose again, is coming back again, all of that. So my mom, she got saved, I believe she was around the age of 8. And her parents, my grandparents, believed in going to church. My grandfather, he was a minister at a Baptist church. I believe he was either an assistant pastor or an associate pastor. I'll have to ask my mom. But I know that he was a minister. So they were heavily in church. My dad, on the other hand, he didn't have a minister for a mom or a dad. His mom got into church around the same time he did, which was around the age of 18. My dad, he got saved at the age of 18, went to a Pentecostal church, and that's the majority of the churches that he went to were Pentecostal. And if you are not familiar with a Pentecostal church, they're real strict in certain ways, but they're real energetic. You know, they'll jump up and down, they'll run around the church, they'll dance in the middle of the aisle. It's just what they do. So both of my parents pretty much came from a church background. And when they met, you know, it was like, Eureka! We both go to church. So when we have kids, we're going to raise our kids in the nurture and the ammunition of the Lord. That was the saying. That was the saying. So while I was in my mother's womb, when she got pregnant with me, she was reading the Bible to me. She was, playing the Walkman. You know, she was putting the headphones on her stomach and playing gospel songs and Bible verses while I was in the womb. Now, I remember none of this. Of course I wouldn't remember it. Who remembers when they're in the womb? You know what? There may be somebody who remembers. I am not one of them. But she would do that, and I was engulfed in church and Jesus even before I really knew what Jesus was or who he was. So fast forward to the day I was born. Within a few months, I was blessed at church. So if you grew up churchy like me, 9 times out of 10, and I could bet I could bet some money on it, you had it's kind of like I guess it's similar to like a baptism for babies. Is that what they call it? But I just call it a blessing service. So the pastor comes and blesses the baby. He pours oil on the baby. 9 times out of 10 is olive oil. Oh gosh, but it's the truth. It's the truth. Everyone knows that the oil that they're pouring on people is olive oil from Walmart. Okay, maybe Aldi's. No, Aldi's is too hot. Well, maybe it is Aldi's, but they getting that olive oil and they are dabbing people with it. Okay. So they put olive oil on the baby. Not like they don't like drown them in olive oil, but they'll take a little bit and like put a cross on their forehead or something like that. And they'll pray over the baby, pray over the parents, asking the Lord to give them the strength to raise this child in the nurture and the ammunition of the Lord. I'm probably saying that wrong, but I'm going to go with it. And then for the child, that the child will grow up to be how God wants them to be. And if there's godparents involved, you know, the pastor will pray for the godparents. It's just a whole to-do. It's a whole service. So sometimes the pictures are taken, all of that. So I was blessed in church. I was actually blessed by the late Elder Richard Hinton. There is a whole video on that. And just in case you don't know who Elder Richard Hinton is, he was a prominent pastor in the Chicago area. I wouldn't say that he had a mega church, but it was a nice sized church. I don't think it was on the level of like a Pastor Meeks or a Bishop Brazier, but he did have a lot of people in his church. And he was well known in the Chicago area. He passed away several years ago. But there was a video of Pastor Hinton blessing me, and I'm just looking like, well, what the heck is going on? What are you putting on me? I don't understand. But yes, he blessed me. My parents went through the whole service. I got prayed over. My parents got prayed over. My godparents weren't there, which, I don't know what happened there. I won't get into that, but my godparents were there, but my parents were there, which is the most important party. And they prayed that I would grow up to be what God called me to be. Pretty much, I've been going to church ever since. So I don't remember church between the ages of like 2 to 4, but maybe around that 5-year mark. When I was 5, I remember going to a church called Full Gospel Christian Center in the city of Chicago again. And I remember hanging out with who I would call the big kids in the choir, because I wanted to be in the choir. Couldn't sing a lick. Still can't sing a lick, but that's okay. Singing in the choir, trying to be like the big kids, playing around with the kids that are my age, sitting during service, wishing that the pastor would stop preaching, would go to sleep, and then wake up and he still be preaching. And I'd be like, didn't he I'm sure it's over an hour now that he's going. Still going. So I remember that. I remember my parents being heavily involved in the church. They would, I believe my parents dealt with the youth during that time period when I was around 5 years old, I want to say. So I remember that. I just remember just church being a part of my life. Just like school was a part of my life, church was a part of my life as well. My parents also raised me according to the Bible. So I remember my mom especially, she would have Bible class with me and my brother, and she would primarily teach from the book of Proverbs, which, if you're not familiar with the Bible, the book of Proverbs is a bunch of wise sayings, and they're practical wise sayings that were written by King Solomon. And there are practical sayings that you could use in your life. And she felt like that book was good for instruction, and so she started us out with that. And I would hate it too. I would hate it, because you would be like, okay, kids, time for Bible class. I'm like, really? There's other stuff that I could do. Had nothing going on. What do you have going on at the age of 5 or 6? Nothing. But she would teach us whether we liked it or not. And honestly, those teachings are still ingrained in my head today. Proverbs especially, just ingrained in my head. And then not only did they teach me from the book of Proverbs, but they also made sure that I knew the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments was on steroids, okay? And I actually went to a Christian school from kindergarten through 8th grade. So I had it twofold. I had teachings from the Bible at home, and then I had them at school. So it was like, oh my gosh, really? But my parents were heavy, on us knowing about the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments, if you're not familiar with that, in the book of, I believe it's Exodus, Moses, he had just delivered the people of Israel from Egypt, and they were walking to the promised land because God had promised them this land that would be theirs specifically, full of milk and honey, and it was supposed to be a rich land that would remind them that this is where God had brought them to from Egypt. It was just supposed to be their land. And so Moses, he was on Mount, so he climbed up Mount Sinai, and he got a visit from the Lord. The Lord told him to write down these 10 commandments, and they were actually on stone. They were on stone. So God told Moses to write down these 10 commandments, and that's what's in the Bible today. So examples of the 10 commandments: do not kill, do not steal, do not fornicate, meaning not having sex before marriage, do not commit adultery, meaning, cheating on your spouse while married. Okay. So all of these teachings were on steroids for us. Us meaning me and my brother. And I'm sure if I would talk to my brother, if he was on the podcast today, he would say, yeah, these teachings, we got them a lot, but they're still engraved in our heads and in our hearts. So I got this at an early age, okay? All of these teachings from conception all the way to about 5, okay? But when I turned 6 years old, that's when things started to change. I remember being in the car with my mom, and this was on a Sunday. We were driving to a different place. We weren't driving to the same church that we usually go to. It was a completely different route. And so I recognized it. I was like, Mommy, where are we going? And she was like, oh, we're going to a new church. And I was like, oh, okay. Not knowing that the new church, my dad was going to be the pastor. Okay. So at the age of 6, my dad felt like he was called to be a pastor. He felt that the Lord had called him to minister, to have his own church. So I became a PK kid at the age of 6 years old. We started out at a YMCA. We started out at a YMCA in the city, and then we kind of worked our way up to actually purchasing a building. But I'll get to that a little bit later. But that's when my life changed. That's when my life changed drastically. Because now people were looking at me more with a critical eye than ever before. So, like I was saying, we started the church in a YMCA in Chicago. Then we got the money to buy a church on 55th and Garfield, which in Chicago, that's Inglewood, that is the hood, okay? Then we merged with a church in Harvey. And you know what, let me back up. So the church that we had, that was, well, we were having church in the YMCA, that was from maybe 1996 to 2005. Then the church on 55th and Garfield in Inglewood, that was from about 2005 to 2013. Then we merged with a church in the suburbs where we're at now, and that started in 2013, and we're still there. So I've been a pastor's kid for I would say about that would be about 20 Ooh, I'm trying to do the math. That's about 23 years. 23 years I've been a preacher's kid. And I've seen a lot. Being a pastor's kid, it has its pros and it has its cons. Some of the pros are, of course, I would hear the message long before anyone else would. I would hear my dad praying about his message. Also, I would see him studying really hard, actually, in his word to try to get his message together. And I would ask him sometimes what he was trying to minister on. Sometimes he would tell me, sometimes he wouldn't, because he felt like it was a surprise. Okay, Dad. um, but yeah, sometimes I would hear the message before everyone else would. Or if he wanted to tell a joke or something during the message, he would run it past me so that, I could, because I would tell him the truth. I'd be like, Dad, that's funny, or Dad, that's a dud. So yeah, that was a pro, hearing the message, or hearing about certain things that were going on in the church long before anyone else would. And sometimes this would be like good stuff, like, hey, we're getting this new church on this new church in Inglewood, or it could be like some gossip. Now, if my dad, and in my dad's defense, my dad, he wasn't telling me, things that were in confidence. So things that he discovered during like a counseling session, or during an impromptu session with one of the members. But if something was going on with the church, like, for example, if somebody hit our fence at the church, knocked it down, something like that, then I will find out before anyone else would. Or if somebody was leaving the church, I would find out before a lot of people would. It's just things like that. Another pro was that I had a 24/7 pastor. So there have been many times where I have called my dad and I've been like, okay, I'm not talking to you as your daughter. I'm talking to you as a member of a church. So I need for us to drop the father-daughter relationship for a minute, and let's go to pastor-member relationship, because that's what I need right now. There have been many times where I asked my dad to pray for me, to give me some kind of encouraging words, to help me understand something that he said during his message. 24/7, I have that access. Some people, they have to make appointments with their pastor, and sometimes when they make an appointment, they still can't see their pastor. Some pastors have like security. You can't touch your pastor, you can't speak to your pastor. Sound like a personal problem. That one that was not my testimony. I shouldn't have said that. But that wasn't my testimony. My dad, he was always available. If there was some kind of question that I had, he was always available to talk to me about it. Anything I needed prayer for, he was there. And that was 24/7 access. So that was certainly a pro for me. Another pro was that me seeing my dad pastoring actually helped strengthen my relationship with God. I saw my dad go through a lot, and to see his strength and his faith in God get even stronger, even through those obstacles, that just encouraged me. I'm like, okay, so if God gives my dad the strength and the courage and the faith that he needs in order to carry on, then certainly he can do the same for me. So yeah, and he probably doesn't know that it's done that. He may have an inkling, but I don't think he really knows the impact that me watching him as a child growing up, seeing him pray, hours before the Lord, or read his Bible and or educate us on certain things, it really had an impact on my relationship with God. Now, those are the pros, but to me, it seems like there were a lot more cons than pros, I'll say. Cons, as a pastor kid, I was judged a lot more for not doing. So I'll explain what I mean by that. As a pastor's kid, it is expected of you to support your father or your mother if they're ministers. So you're supposed to be at every church service, every Bible class, every event. You're supposed to participate in said events. You're supposed to participate in ministry specifically. And you know what? I have two examples. One example was at my church, we decided to have a purity ceremony. I did not want to participate because I did not want to put my business out there as far as whether or not I had sex. That's nobody's business but my own. And I didn't want anybody knowing my sexual business. And first of all, I really get embarrassed doing things in front of people. Like I get super embarrassed. So the spotlight being on me like that, and of course there was other women involved, but the spotlight being like that on me, that wouldn't have been good for me. It would have been very embarrassing for me. And then, of course, I just didn't want to participate. So, of course, this was mainly my mom's idea, so she was a little bit upset, but she kind of got over it. My dad was like, okay, you grown, you do whatever you want to do. Cool. So, I didn't participate in the ceremony as far as purifying myself before the Lord, quote unquote. But what I did was, I handed roses to the women and the girls who did participate. Okay. I made my contribution, okay? So I had an older lady come up to me. She was actually from another church, but I knew her from going to said church, or visiting said church on multiple occasions with my dad. But she told me, she was like, I'm very disappointed in you. And I was like, did I do something? Did I not hand out the roses right? Like, what did I do? And so I asked her why. And she was like, you should have participated in the purity ceremony, you being a pastor's child and all. And so, and then she left, so I didn't really have a chance to respond. But I'm like, what that got to do with anything? Because I'm a pastor's kid, I'm supposed to participate in everything that goes on in my father's church? Is that how it goes? If so, I'm failing big time right now. Because I'm telling you, right now, I'm pretty much a bench member, okay? I put my cheek in the seat, and I sit there, and now, I do the announcements. I do that, and, I count the money after church. That's about it. But other than that, now I'm not contributing too much because I've already contributed a lot as a child. I don't want to do it again as an adult. It's too much. It's just too much. So I'm like, me not participating, I gave out roses at least. But what she was expecting was me as a pastor's child to set the example for all of the other women. But that's not my job. That's not my job. That's not my calling. That's not my ministry. Okay? I'm not the girl who is and I should say it this way. Of course, I want to live my life the best way that I can according to the Word of God. That's number one. I want to live according to the Word of God. I don't want to deter from that. But me being an example for other women solely because I'm a pastor's kid, that's a lot of pressure, and that's not practical. There's so many pastors' kids that are like messed up because of that. They're messed up. So so it's just a lot. And you know what? I had another example for that, but it completely slipped my mind as far as not doing. But it'll come back to me. It will come back to me. But the purity ceremony for sure, that was something that kind of stuck with me. Oh, I got it. Thank you, Lord, for a good memory. But me and my husband, we went to a wedding. And there were a lot of ministers there, or people who were desiring to be in the ministry. Now, me being a pastor's kid, that's never been, my desire, because I saw what my dad had to go through. I was like, I do not want that. I want to get far away from that as I can, because that's not, my thing. That's not my calling, I should say. It got to the point too where I was like, I prayed to God, like, Lord, please do not send me a husband who is in the ministry. I cannot do it. So far we're good. Knock on wood. So far we're good. We're good. But anyway, was at this wedding, a whole lot of ministers, and we sat at a table during the reception, and they were quizzing me and my husband. We got on the topic of church, and so they asked what are your positions in the ministry? And so my husband explained his part, and I was like, well, I say the announcements, and I'm part of the treasury department. So I count the money that comes in for tithes and offerings. And they were like, oh. That's exactly their response. They were like, oh. Like, okay, you're not a pastor, you're not an evangelist, you're not a prophetess, you're not a deaconess. Come on now. Like, what are you doing with yourself? You're a failure if you're not that. I'm like, no, I don't do any of that. And I'm completely fine with it. I'm completely fine. As long, if the Lord calls me to do that, okay, me and the Lord will certainly have a discussion. But, if He's called me to do it, I will do it, okay? I will do it. So far, I have not felt that compelling desire to do any of that. Okay? No desire whatsoever. No pull, no word from the Lord, no word from a prophet or whatever saying that I'm supposed to do this. None of that, okay? So I want to stay away from it as far as possible. So, but a lot of people, they desire that. Maybe they see the glitz and the glamour of being a minister, or being a prophetess, or a bishop, or bishop-elect, or whatever, apostle. There's so many titles, I just can't keep up. But some people, they see the glitz and the glamour, but there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. I mean, you see the outside looking in. Outside looking in, yeah, it looks like the pastor's having a good time. I mean, pastor gets served first. Pastor got someone to wipe the sweat off his forehead. Pastor got, his own driver. Pastor got his own jet, a $68 million jet. Oh, I won't get into what pastor that is, but if you're familiar with the pastor I'm talking about, that This pastor, he felt like he needed a $68 million jet to spread the good news of Jesus across the world. I'm like, you can do that by Uber. You can do that by Uber. Why do you need a $68 million jet? But okay, that's neither here nor there. But basically, people see the glitz and the glamour. They don't see the hard work that goes into being a person in ministry. Like, I saw my parents work hard. They worked extremely hard. Working full-time jobs, then being full-time pastors. It was a lot of work. When nobody else was there at the church, they were. When nobody else cleaned the church, they did. When nobody cut the grass, they did. If they were having Bible class and they were the only people there, so what? Church still goes on. I just saw so much people, saying like, oh yeah, I'm with you, pastor. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I love this church, yada, yada. The same people who leave. This is family and non-family alike. I've seen them go through a lot. I've seen them, and I could share hundreds of stories about what I saw my parents go through. It was a lot, and people don't see that. But then when they get into it and they see what work goes into it, then they fall away. But no, I think if the Lord calls you to be a pastor or someone in ministry, then He'll give you the strength and the courage in order to go through, in order to not only handle the good times, but also the bad times as well. So that's one of the cons. I was judged a lot, for not doing. And then I kind of jumped ahead of myself, but I was judged a lot for not doing enough as far as being a minister. I do have another example. I remember I was in 8th grade, and at the school I went to, we would have chapel. I believe it was on every Wednesday. So there was a minister who came, and I guess he was a prophet. I'm not sure. There's so many prophets out there. I can't keep up. But he started prophesying. I'm like, here we go. I'm like, every time a prophet comes by and I'm in the vicinity, I usually get called out. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I'm giving out this vibe like, call on me. Come on, call on me. I want to hear a word from the Lord. Call on me. No, I'd be scared out my mind. And it goes back to having the spotlight put on me. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Don't put the spotlight on me. Put it on someone else, and I'll just sit there and watch. I'll just sit there and watch. I do not like the spotlight on me. But anyway, so the prophet came to me, and he was like, you, and I was like, okay, there's a lot of yous in here. There's about 50 other yous. You're going to have to be a little bit specific. So I pointed at myself. I was like, me, you? And he was like, yeah, you. I was like, okay. He was like, you have this Juanita Bynum spirit. You're just going to be, you're going to be a wonderful asset to the kingdom of God. Okay. Now, if anyone knows about Juanita Bynum, she is a prominent minister in the Christian community, but she got some issues. She got a lot of issues, I'll say, and I don't really follow her anymore. But I'm like, I don't think I want to be like Juanita Bynum. Because I think at that time she was going through with her husband, and there were like some negative things coming out about her. It was just like a whole lot going on. And I was like, I don't think I want to be like Juanita Bynum. And then two, Juanita Bynum is a minister. I didn't want to do that. I felt like I wasn't called to do that. So it's like, okay, like I don't know what to do with this information, but okay, whatever. So far, I'm not a Juanita Bynum. So I mean, I'm only 29 though, so time will tell, I guess. And I'm talking about the ministry part. I'm not talking about the negative parts of her. Just talking about the ministry. Also, another con, I had to be at church when no one else was. So if there was Bible class, I had to be there. If no one was cleaning the church, I would have to clean the church. I would have to help my parents clean the church, rather. From the nasty bathroom to people putting gum on the bottom of the pews. Not to do all that. I had to scrape that gum off. Yes, I had to scrape the gum off. It was disgusting. It was so disgusting. When no one was there at church, I would have to do it. If no one was part of the music ministry, guess who was a music ministry? Me and my brother. I remember I used to be the one that operated the CDs and the sound system. CDs, that would be our praise and worship, because we didn't have money to pay an organist, because these musicians, they expensive. They are so expensive. Sometimes I think I'm in the wrong career. Because the way they be getting paid, it is like, wow. Not saying that they don't deserve it, but it's like, wow. I'm amazed. But yeah, I remember for praise and worship, my me and my brother, I would do the CDs for praise and worship, and to play any music like during altar call or if somebody was getting prayed for. And then my brother, he would play the drums. We were the praise and worship team, because nobody else was. We were it. So if anyone else failed to come to church, we couldn't say, oh no, we not coming to church. We had to be there. Sick, well, broken leg. That's terrible. Bad hair day. It didn't matter. I remember I had food poisoning and I still had to come to church. I was still there all weak and frail, sipping on my Gatorade. I had to be there. And I know there's other pastor kids that can identify. So yes, growing up churchy, and more specifically growing up as a pastor's kid, it was a challenge. But in the end, my relationship with God is strong. I've learned so much about God, I think more with my dad being a pastor than I did when he wasn't pastoring. I learned about faith. I learned about love. I learned about patience. Just things that, that you read about in the Bible, but to see them in action, it really helped to strengthen my relationship with God. So, though growing up churchy and specifically as a pastor's kid had its challenges, more challenges than there were good times, I should say. Believe it or not, my relationship with God, that foundation came from me growing up churchy. So, what were your experiences growing up churchy? I would love to know. And especially if you're pastor's kids, what were your experiences? Let me know. Email me at mindofmillennials@gmail.com. Also, you can provide a comment on our Facebook page, The Millennial Mind. You can also listen to previous episodes on Spotify, Anchor, Pocket Cast, and Apple Podcasts. Keep in mind, too, that for the Christmas holiday, I'm going to be doing some giveaways. So make sure you listen to that. I feel like I'm in the giving spirit. So that will be starting in the month of December. That will be for the whole month of December. Yeah. So before we end the podcast, I just wanted to say this quote that we can think about. So it says, "The church is not a gallery for the better exhibition of eminent Christians, but a school for the education of imperfect ones." Okay, y'all, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, I will see you soon.